Okay, let's take a look at exercise 20-7. I went into Cengage and I printed out an algorithmic version of the problem. So it's exactly like your problem for your homework on Monday, but the numbers are different. But you'll hopefully get what I'm talking about here. So they give us the general ledger account for work in process for the baking department. So just walked through it here. We started out with 4,800 units, all of which were 2/5 completed. That's with respect to conversion costs. It says all the direct materials are put in process at the beginning of production. So with respect to conversion, they were 2/5 completed. We started another 86,400 into production during the month, and we finished and transferred to the next department 87,600 units. Now they have a blank here. We have to figure out how many units we ended with in ending work in process. Those units with respect to conversion costs were 2/5 completed. So the first thing they want us to do is to figure out that question mark there. So that formula is pretty straightforward from a logic standpoint. So how many did we start with at the beginning of the month? How many units did we enter into production during the month? We'll subtract how many units we transferred out. That should leave us with what we have in ending work in process. So in this problem, I started with 4,800 units, and these are all in whole units. So irrespective of how much they were completed, we started out with 4,800 units. We started 86,400 into production. We transferred 87,600 out. That leaves us with 3,600 in ending work in process. So the next thing they want us to do is to figure out the equivalent units of production. And I'm going to go back and forth between kind of a visual diagram and what they have here. So to begin with, let's talk about whole units. So for whole units, let me see how I can do this. For whole units here, we start out with 4,800 whole units. Here's a number that we need to calculate. How many units were started and completed? The information above doesn't tell us how many were started during the month and finished during the month. It just tells us how much we started and how much we transferred out. These 87,600 units that we transferred out, that we finished, include the beginning 4,800. Let's assume FIFO, which would make sense. We would finish those 4,800. Those would be the first units out of this 87,600 that we transferred. The remainder would be units that we started and finished during the month. So this started and completed, that's 87,600 minus 4,800. So for the month, we started and finished 82,800. We transferred 87,600 to finished goods, and we have 3,600 left at the end of the month. Now they have a spot here for total. I really don't think that makes sense. The total doesn't really mean anything in this respect. So for the next thing I want to talk about is looking at that same thing for materials and for conversion costs. So now I want to look at a graphic here that I drew. So if materials go in at the start of the process, that means that we didn't put any materials into work in process during the month. We want to come up with a number of what did we get done during the month with respect to materials, and we didn't have to add any materials to work in process at beginning because they got it at the beginning of the process. So 4,800 times 0%. Now for the units that I started and completed during the month, I get full credit for those. I had to put all the materials into that because materials go in when I start it. So that's 82,800. We calculated that in when we looked at whole units. Ending work in process, because the materials go in at the beginning of the process, even though these weren't done yet, they got all the materials right when we started it. So that's 3,600. So materials, that's pretty easy. If they go in at the beginning of the process, you're never going to have anything that you add to work in process. Full credit for what you start and finish, full credit for what you start that's still left over. Now conversion costs are a little bit tricky. So I add these up, I get 86,400. So conversion costs are a little bit trickier, but I think this graphic helps. So for beginning work in process, they were 2/5 done, but I had to do the conversion costs, the direct labor and the overhead, for the remaining 3/5 to finish them out. So this hatched portion is what I did this month. So that's 4,800 times 3/5. The remainder, if it was 2/5 done, 3/5 is what I have left yet to do. So that's what I did at the very beginning of this month. So 4,800 times 3/5 is 2,880. So doing 3/5 of the work on 4,800 units is the same as doing all the work on 2,880 full units. I get full credit for what I started and completed, just like with materials. And then when it comes to ending work in process, I'm just going to get credit for what I get done. In this case, I got 2/5 of the work done, so I get credit for that much work. 3,600 times 2/5 is 1,440. So doing 2/5 of the work on 3,600 units is the same as doing all the work on 1,440. I want to add whole units to whole units. So in this case, I get 87,120 for conversion costs. I want to enter that in the problem here, and I think it's helpful to draw it out like that. For direct materials, I have 0 in the beginning, 8280 for what I started and completed. That gives me the sum of these two, 8280 for finished goods, and then I have 3,600 for ending work in process for 86,400. When I do conversion costs now, for beginning, I have 2,880. That's 4,800 times 3/5. I get 82,800 for what I started and completed. And then I've got 1,440. That's 3,600 times 2/5 for 87,120. So I hope you find that helpful. I will scan this and put it on Canvas for you. Please take a look at that when you're working on this one. Now, when it comes to the next problem, 20-11, they have you do the same thing, but they ask you for costs. In that case, I would look, for example, at materials. I would look at what I spent on materials, 138,240, and I would divide that by 86,400. So I divide what costs I incurred by what I did with respect to materials. For conversion costs, I would add these two numbers together. Remember, conversion cost is direct labor and factory overhead. So I would add those two numbers together. That's what I spent on the conversion cost, and this is what I did. So I would divide by that number. So we're going to get the most accurate unit cost that we can by looking at these two separately. I hope you find that helpful. Thank you.